Hi there, and welcome to Naturally Recovering Autism. I am your host, Karen Thomas, and I want to thank you so much for being here and being a proactive parent and getting the resources that you need to let your child live their most fulfilling and independent life possible. When my own son was diagnosed with autism, I was told to drug him and try behavioral therapies, and there was nothing else that we could do for him but manage his symptoms the rest of his life. But I didn't want to do that. Fortunately, my background in craniosacral therapy of now 30 years let me know that the brain can and does heal, but I didn't know that much about autism. What I did know is that I didn't want to just mask the symptoms with dangerous drugs. I wanted to find the causes and work with them naturally. And fast forward, it took me a decade and a lot of time and effort, but today my son is no longer diagnosable with autism after being told it could not happen. So I'm here to share with you valuable resources to save you the time and some of the expense that I had to spend to figure it out, and to help you let your child lead to their best results possible. Every child's level of recovery is different, but we know that children who couldn't sleep through the night are sleeping now through the night and happily. Their immune systems are now strong where they were once sick all the time. Children who were nonverbal and their parents were told they could never speak are now speaking. Children who were getting D's and F's in school are getting A's and B's. And those that were so anxious all the time and couldn't sit still and were uncomfortable in their own bodies are now calm and happy and relaxed. And they're leading fulfilling and independent lives with friends. This is what we want for our kids. So I'm here to share the resources with you so that you can get the best results for your child, the best possible. And you can start that right now with my free download of the top 7 foods to eliminate beginning today, of the top foods that are the most inflammatory and toxic that are contributing to those physical and behavioral symptoms of autism that your child is having. They're making his life uncomfortable. So you can get that right now at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/7 foods. And feel free to share that with anybody you know who would be interested. And I will also link to it in today's show notes. There's, of course, a lot more than diet, but this is something you could start doing today that will begin to reduce those symptoms. And I'm happy to share everything I can with you. So right now, let's dive into today's episode. Hi there, and welcome back once again. I want to thank you for being here as always and what you're doing for your child, because it is really up to us as parents. And we know that. We all learn that along the way, kind of sometimes the hard way. I myself learned it. But I'm glad I did the research and the education for myself, as you are for your own child, because I wanted to get my son better. I knew he could live a better life, and he absolutely is, due to my research. And that's what I share with you now are the resources that can help you to help your child live a better life. And one of the things that I'm asked most often is, Karen, how can my child speak better? Or how can I get my child to speak? And of course, there are many, many different issues around speech with autism and speech in general. But there are a few culprits that I find over and over, and there are studies that actually show that they affect it. So I am going to be talking about today the underlying causes of speech issues in autism. And I'm also going to be linking to some studies. Today's show notes will be at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/196. This is episode 196. And in episode 195, my last one, if you missed it, please listen to that, because it has to do with the toxicity of aluminum. And I'm going to do a recap in the beginning of this one today, because aluminum is very much implicated in speech issues, language disorders, and how it affects the brain. And there are studies that show this. So I, again, will be linking to them in the show notes. And then if you also didn't get a chance to listen to 195, do go back and listen to that. So basically, again, it's common with children of autism to be either completely nonverbal or have limited speech. And there are a lot of underlying reasons. It can be related to the gut-brain axis and other things as well. But today, what I'm going to talk about are the 3 large culprits, which are aluminum, viruses, and something called PANS. And I'm going to discuss each of these individually. And I'll link in the show notes to other episodes where I've talked about them more in depth as well.
But this is important to show you. I like to give studies so that people say, well, is this hearsay? Does it just like maybe seem like it's associated with speech because that happens all the time with these things? Or, if people are really more wanting to have that, that scientific background, I like to show you that studies have seen it be associated with speech and it's common. So again, many of these symptoms have to do with a lot of toxins, pathogens. There are co-infections. If you've been with me for a while, you know I'm very A to Z. This isn't just about a little bit of diet or detoxification. We want to get to the underlying root causes of the symptoms or that are causing your child's symptoms of autism. And they are a symptom. Autism is basically a lump of symptoms that they use to diagnose, and say, okay, your child has autism based on these things. And I've done an episode in the past that I can link to for you called What Causes the Symptoms of Autism, which you may find very interesting. And I directly show you the correlation between the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM, that is used by psychiatrists, psychologists for diagnosing autism, and how similar those diagnostic criteria are to the symptoms caused by many of the underlying root causes. I again help you with this if you need my help. I don't want you to feel like, well, this is great, Karen, but what do I do about it? I offer you resources that I will link to in the show notes again for you so that you have the support and the knowledge and the guidance on this journey if that is something that you are still needing. Okay, so let's get to it. Again, it's never just one thing. Speech is helped by many different things, of course, but it is important, again, to do that A to Z so nothing important gets missed. This is where I see other things being they're not thorough enough. People are starting too much detoxification or fighting pathogens too quickly, and we have to stabilize the immune system. So all of these things are important to remember. Again, the three top culprits that I tend to see most and studies are showing that are linked to speech disorders are aluminum, viruses, and PANs. And many of them can be very hidden. So in aluminum, I'm going to, again, link to the show notes that I did for episode 195 for you. But how do we get aluminum exposure? I'm going to do a bit of a recap here because I want it to also be in this, a lot of it to be in this episode as well. But and I will link to the study and some of the studies here as well. Aluminum is prevalent in our society, as are many of the toxic metals. They are in the air we breathe, the food we eat, because it's in the soil. It's in aluminum pans and cookware, the water we drink, the deodorants and lotions and other things that we use in beauty aids and healthcare aids. It's very, very important that you read your labels and that you're getting green, non-toxic materials to use in your home, that the things that you're using on your body are organic, but also labeled, the label shows that it doesn't carry aluminum. It is very, very common. Just for an example, if you're putting deodorant on, you're putting it right in the armpit, which is right over one of the key lymphatic drainage areas. So it's absorbing directly into your lymphatic system, which is how we drain our toxins out. So it's absorbing into the body. Just remember that with everything that you use. It is also in other things like antacids and medications and a lot of supplements that are bad that you don't realize. So again, knowing that almost 75% of all adjuvant-based medical treatments include aluminum salts. They're aluminum poisoning with emphasis on its mechanisms and treatments of intoxication. This is the study I'm going to be linking to for you to get some more knowledge about this if you want to even dig deeper in here. But what are some of the health risks of aluminum? So approximately 60% of the body's aluminum is stored in the bones, 25% in the lungs, 10% in the muscle, 3% in the liver, and 1% in the brain. Inside the cells, aluminum is stored in the lysosomes of brain neurons, liver, spleen, myocytes of the heart, smooth muscle cells, epithelial cells, so your gut as well, epithelial cells of the kidneys, very, very big in the kidneys, and mitochondria, which are the cells energy source. So this is really important to understand these things. And they are very, very inflammatory. And inflammation is one of the big, big things in autism that we are always working with. Inflammation is how your body is reacting to the toxins, the pathogens, the infections, other things that are going on. This inflammation and where it's affecting the brain and the body or where these symptoms are coming from, okay? The neurological effects of aluminum on the brain. Know that even small amounts of aluminum are harmful. When aluminum loading occurs, aluminum gradually accumulates in human neurons. Okay, that's the brain cells and the central nervous system, right? Brain and spine, making them more vulnerable to other toxicities. And of course, we are exposed to many. Studies have suggested that even small amounts of aluminum in the brain may alter iron homeostasis in the brain, causing neurodegenerative disorders. Now, what kind of neurological manifestations are we looking for? You want to look for things like memory loss, very, very commonly seen in things like Alzheimer and dementia, right? Tremors, we see jerking movements. Well, we call that stimming in autism. Diminished coordination, weakness in motor movements, lack of curiosity, just blasé, they don't care about anything. Speech disturbances, dyspraxia, dysphagia, stuttering, and more. This is indicated in this study. So this is very important to remember that this has been implicated in studies. Aluminum's causal changes in behavior and consciousness levels, such as agitation, confusion, again, more stimming, seizures, grand mal seizures, coma, and even death. And those are linked to in this study as well. It can be very dangerous. I've also done an interview with Professor Christopher Exley, and he's a PhD biologist who's been researching aluminum for over 40 years. He's even published over 200 peer-reviewed studies, or scientific papers, and I will link to my interview with Dr. Exley in the show notes today as well, because he is talking about how multiple studies show the elevation levels of aluminum in the brain are linked to autism as well as early Alzheimer's. He has a study through the Journal of Trace Elements in Biology, and I will link to this in the show notes. The aluminum content of the brain tissue in autism was consistently high, with some of the highest values for aluminum in human brain tissue yet recorded. So that is pretty darn significant. So again, I will link to my episode number 103 with Professor Exley, and you can then also, see the studies that he's done on these things as well. The next thing that I want to talk about that is implicated in speech, and it damages the speech neurons and speech branches in the brain, and that is viruses. Now, to give you some perspective, there are these protective layers in the brain. They're called meninges, and they surround the brain and spinal cord. And infectious agents such as viruses, bacteria, parasites, and fungus, of course, we know with candida and fungi, right, can affect the meninges and the brain and trigger difficulties with language function. In other words, viruses are a big component to damage the language and speech branches of the brain, and working with them can help with speech. I have seen it. I've worked with, and I'm going to link to an interview I did with with a mom who found me when her son was 27 years old. He was still nonverbal. She said she had tried everything since he was diagnosed at age 2, 25 years prior. She just didn't give up, thankfully. And like I said, he was 27 years old and still nonverbal when she found me. She joined my program, and within 2.5 months in my program, her son was speaking and started finishing reading books with her when they were reading them together. And so I would say everybody's level is different. I'm not here to make claims, but I have seen this happen, and parents who know what to do and the right things are getting results. It can take time. Everybody's time frame is different. For some, like this boy, it was a few months. For others, it might be a year, but it is worth it if you be consistent and you know the right things to do. So the brain's immune system contains protective cells called microglia. These cells regulate brain development, maintenance of neural networks, and injury repair. Viruses can be active in the body for years and be continuing overactivity, causing overactivity of the immune system. And we know children with autism or people with autism, it is very important that we don't just boost the immune system, which I can link to an episode I did that with that one in the show notes as well. Because if your immune system is overactive already, then you can cause an autoimmune disorder, which we're going to talk about after we talk about viruses here. And if it's underactive, what we want to do is regulate it. It can be underactive or overactive, especially in people with autism. So we are here to modulate or regulate. If you boost it, you can end up with more trouble. So very, very important to remember that. When stimulated by a foreign substance, these microglia secrete chemicals, including glutamate, preparing for an immune attack, right? The body is just doing what it knows it's supposed to do. It's going to set up for that immune attack, right? This is what it sees, these pathogens, these toxins, these invasions are coming in. So it's working hard to help you. It thinks it's helping you, but it can be triggered as a sort of an on position, and then it can stay activated, spreading these chemicals and leading to autoimmune issues, okay? Multiple systems and organs of the body can be damaged. For example, the cells of the liver, our main organ of detoxification, are highly susceptible, as well as the respiratory system. And I'd also like to mention that glutamate can trigger seizures, so the viral component needs to be observed as a factor in them. The immune system plays a vital role in brain development, and a weak immune system can impact the brain function, especially cognition and our ability to think. Inflammation is a strong factor here, and we're always working to reduce inflammation as we regain health. In any type of disease that there is in the body, for anybody with anything, inflammation is a very, very key factor. And it's how your body is reacting to whatever the invasive piece is. So we always, again, want to go back to what is the cause? What's the underlying root cause? That's what we want to work with. That's what's important, not just a symptom. A symptom is how your body is reacting to the cause. So we got to work with the cause. And I'm going to link in the show notes for you a study on association between enterovirus infection and speech and language impairments, a nationwide population-based study. Basically, the eligible causes were assessed during the study period for an incident of cases of speech and language impairment. The analysis were applied, Cox regression analysis were applied, adjusting for sex, age, and other physical and mental problems. The results? In the fully adjusted Cox regression model, EV, enterovirus, infection was positively associated with speech and language impairment in 95% of the subjects. 95% is pretty high. Conclusion, EV infection is temporarily associated with speech and language impairments. Temporarily, I like the word. These findings have herein provided rationale for educating families that enterovirus infection may be associated with speech and language problems in susceptible individuals, and that monitoring for such a presentation would be warranted. Notwithstanding, relatively few reports have mentioned the effects of EV infection on speech and language problems, and combined with other infections and comorbidities and risk factors, might have a greater probability to develop speech problems. Again, why we're so importantly A to Z in autism recovery. Clinicians should be vigilant for the onset of language development abnormalities of preschool children with enterovirus infection. So that is viruses. And the third one here that I'll be talking about today that is implicated in speech is something called PANS. It's an acronym for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Syndrome. PANS is associated often with strep throat, streptococcal infections, but not always. It can be just a basic symptom of an autoimmune reaction where the immune system has been affected to go basically, overactive, and it becomes an autoimmune disorder. And I have done an episode on this in the past, and again, I'll link to that in the show notes for you. But basically, what is PANS? So I'm gonna give that for you a little bit. The onset of PANS symptoms come often after a streptococcal or strep infection, but not again always. It can be also it's genetically common with those with mitochondrial deficiency, and we talked about mitochondria already. And there's also a nationwide population study showing the association of disorders, including enteroviruses, which we just talked about as well. Other infections that are known to trigger PANS can be mold, Lyme, Epstein-Barr virus, which is what causes mononucleosis. We commonly may see mycoplasma, which are more respiratory types of infections, such as sore throat, respiratory infections. Also indicated in triggering the immune system to become overactive are, and this is very big, and I'm very, 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 very important to when I work with my members in my program to know, rapid die-off. If you are not instructed on how to slowly and properly begin detoxification before you start targeting these toxins and these infections, you can very likely trigger the immune system to become overactive, leading you to a PANS flare-up, is what we call them. Now, I'll talk about the symptoms here in a moment because it's really important to understand how you'll see often a sudden onset of symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, right? Or tics. They can be vocal tics or motor tics, where their body jerks rapidly, or just kind of like or making loud sounds with their voice. Those are vocal tics. Additional symptoms include separation anxiety, a decline in school, such as in their reading and math abilities, simplified language, baby talk, bedwetting, and increased urination, aggression, and anxiety with stress. They'll become very, very fearful and very clingy. You might see really big dilated pupils. These are common signs, and what's happening is basically that the immune system is attacking the brain, and we want to stop this inflammation and this trigger as quickly as we can. And again, it's why we need to regulate or modulate the immune system, and also why we're working so much with inflammation and making sure there aren't triggers around. Mold in your home is a common one. So a lot of people don't think about it, or if you can't see it, sometimes, as many people say that their house smells mold, kind of mildewy, and they smell it, but they don't see it. And that can be hard too, because it can hide in the air ducts. It can be in the attic. It can be in the basement. It can be in the walls and seeping through in the carpeting. So it's very important to check for mold in your home. Again, I'm going to link to, again, there's some other studies here, but the effects of PANS and PANDAS on communication, a review of literature and implication for speech and language pathologists at Fontbonne University in St. Louis, Missouri. Speech, language, and feeding can be impacted due to antibodies attacking the brain in response to PANS or PANDAS. A child may suddenly begin stuttering or even develop selective mutism. Because of this, children with PANS are at a higher chance of coming across an SLP's caseload, speech language pathology. So again, just something else to really be aware of. Does your child have the signs of PANS? And we do want to work with that and stop the triggers and calm the immune system down again, modulating or regulating and calming down that inflammation. Another study about infection in speech, dysfluency, and other speech symptoms in pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome again specifically investigates dysfluency and other speech symptoms following onset of PANS or PANDAS, prevalence of previously reported speech-related symptoms, vocal tics, selective mutism. Again, methods, a questionnaire was given to a total of 55 individuals. Results, onset of speech dysfluency in association with PANS or PANDAS was reported by 54.5% of the caregivers. Most frequent dysfluency symptoms were higher speech rate, superfluous verbal behavior, verbal blocks, and associated motor symptoms. Again, the increased stimming. We call it stimming in autism usually. It's a common term. Previous findings of vocal tics, baby talk, and mutistic behavior were supported. The let's see here. I want to make sure I reduce speech production and language impairment. Basically, it's over and over and over saying that the conclusion, PANS as a speech disfluency supported and possible link between infection and disfluency. Reported shares several characteristics with stuttering and cluttering, but the caregivers did not consistently associate it with stuttering. The goal here is to keep the child stable. Basically, it's important in autism, again, not to boost the immune system, but to regulate it. Know how to detoxify slowly. Know how to remove the triggers that can be underlying co-infections and toxicity. A lot of people say, well, what about speech therapy? Well, when the brain is too toxic and inflamed, your child may be really, really wanting to be able to speak or to do better, and it can be very hard on their self-esteem. Many therapies can. I saw this with my own son, and I eventually pulled my own son out and found that after I did all of the underlying root cause work with his biology, got out rid of the toxins, the co-infections, the inflammation, he never needed to go back to those therapies. If you've heard my interview with Nanti, a mom, she was spending $95 a week on speech therapy. And then and it really wasn't helping her son very much. And she didn't know why. And she's been a great mom, trying really hard, taking her, week after week to these appointments, spending lots of money and time. And once she began following my program, she ended up, pulling him out because he ended up not needing to go to those therapies. So it is just something to remember that when you do the work on the underlying root causes and the brain is less toxic and less inflamed, and these aluminum pans, viruses, all these other issues that can be causing the problems, when they are then no longer in the way, then the brain can do what it can naturally. So that is our goal, is to remove all these underlying causes safely, naturally. And that is what is so important. Remember, you want to do slow detoxification, transition away from inflammatory foods and chemicals. If you don't have my free food guide yet, please get that. It's at autismcheatsheet.com. Start removing those foods from your child's diet slowly as they're causing inflammation. They're toxic. There's other things. That is step one where you could begin. And yes, of course, there's more. But that is where to begin. Reducing overall symptoms of inflammation, begin supporting direct detoxification. We work with heavy metal toxins, safe methods that don't allow for reabsorption like the pharmaceutical drugs do. Calming the immune system. We're also very important that I mentioned, we work with viruses after we work with Lyme, because Lyme is so common in children with autism, and it is very, very immunosuppressive. So we need to do a little bit of work with Lyme before we start working with the viruses. For further information on the A to Z process and how I can help you, I will link to those things in the show notes for you today, which again will be at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/196. And I'll also link in the show notes to these studies that I cited from, and other interviews that I've done that I think could be very, very helpful and educational and beneficial for you to learn from as well. Because it's really about us working again with those underlying causes. The more knowledge we have, knowledge is key. The more knowledge we have, the better we can help our kids, and the better we understand what the necessity of being persistent and consistent, and how these things take time, but how that education can definitely pay off in the long run. And I've seen changes in children who their parents were told they would never speak, are now speaking. Children who were getting D's and F's in school, now getting A's and B's. Children who were aggressive and even violent, now their parents say, "Oh, they're so calm." And I'll link to a few of these interviews that I've done with some of the members of my program who've talked about this, because it's important for you, as a parent, to have your own hope, your own knowledge, and to understand that there are things that can be done, and your children can live far better lives than they're living today. And it is what we're ultimately moving toward. The number one goal is to help your child to live to their full potential, to be happy and healthy, and to live a quality life just as they deserve. And I know that they can, and that's why I'm grateful again that you're here right now, because learning these things is the key to success. There are studies that show that parents' education and knowledge about what to do for their child is the strongest key to your success. So thank you for being here. I appreciate what you're doing. Please share this with anybody you know who could be interested. There are many, many of us out there in our community of autism that are searching for these resources. So I appreciate you sharing. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you soon.